Welcome back to Plato's Republic. We're starting Book 4 today. We finished up Book 3 yesterday, which was mostly about the Guardians and the ideal education of the Guardians, and how you find people to be the Guardians and how you keep them as Guardians so they don't want to quit. It started out, the Book 3 started out talking about how we need to lie to the Guardians so that they're courageous in battle, and Socrates starts going through all these poems that talk about how bad Hades is, and he says, we got to get rid of all that. And then he talks about musical education, saying, well, we actually need to get rid of harmonies and rhythms that have the same effect, like the harmonies and rhythms of lamentation. And then in the second half, he talks about the physical education of the Guardians, and then also starts talking about the noble lie, or the magnificent myth, which is one of the most famous concepts in the Republic. The physical education, he says it is to improve the body, but ultimately it's meant to balance with the musical education to improve the soul. So all this stuff is for soul improvement. And he also has a little digression about the ideal judge and how judges need to be naive when they're growing up and not exposed to bad people and then learn about bad people later in life. I'm not exactly sure how that figures in. I think it has something to do with how we're going to raise the Guardians and try to keep them from being exposed to bad influences. So at the very end, there is this. He talks about this Phoenician tale that we're going to tell the Guardians, essentially to justify baby snatching. So he says that we're going to, for example, we're going to tell everybody that people can be made of silver or gold or bronze, and we don't want. Sometimes a gold person will be born to a silver person, and that person needs to become a guardian. And so previously in the book, he talked about how we're going to have to administer these IQ and psychological tests to children to find the most virtuous ones, and then make those people our guardians. So by the end of the book, the Guardians, if you go, they started out sounding really cool, like, oh man, that sounds like a great job, like I get to be a soldier, I'm like the most important guy in the city. They kind of sound like slaves by the end of it, so they're told lies about who they are, and they're even kind of gaslighted in their adolescence. So they say their early education, after that takes place, we then tell them, no, actually, you were educated in the middle of the earth, and you emerged from your earth mother, and now your job is to defend your fellow citizen in this ideal city. So we basically just have to lie to, we lie to the Guardians in the beginning about death and how it's not that bad, and then we lie to them about where they came from. We steal them from families sometimes. I think that was the whole point of the gold and silver people, was taking children away from their parents to become guardians. And then we learn that they're not allowed to have private property of any kind. They share this mess hall with the other guardians, and they're not allowed to have gold. And he kind of invents some BS reason why you can't have gold, like, oh, you can't mix mortal gold and spiritual gold, and by gosh, you have all the spiritual gold. We're really jealous of your spiritual gold. So by the end, it sounds to me like these guys are essentially slaves, and they're kind of mind slaves. They don't necessarily, because they've been lied to their whole lives, they don't necessarily realize that they're just kind of the suckers of this whole situation. And remember, once more, the entire reason we have Guardians is to support a luxurious lifestyle. That's why we go to war with the other polises or the other city-states in this society. So, I don't know, it's pretty dark if you think about it, that we're just keeping this class of people around solely to support our luxury, and just keeping them in complete ignorance and making them think that they're the real heroes. So it's a fascinating idea, and it's kind of eminently plausible. It's sort of like, this will come back later, but it's sort of like these guys are living in a mini Matrix, and we don't, we're just kind of extracting resources from them, and they don't need to know better. So that kind of brings us up to speed with Book 3. So we'll see where Book 4 is going to go. I took a quick peek. I think one of the other interlocutors will make some of the objections that I just did, but I only read a couple sentences, so we'll see what happens. Book 4. Let's get started. Socrates' narration continues. Adeimantus interrupted. So remember, Adeimantus is Glaucon's brother, and he had a big role, I think, in Book 2. Okay. But he and Glaucon are kind of interchangeable. How will you defend yourself, Socrates? He said. If someone objects that you are not making these men very happy, and furthermore, that it is their own fault that they are not. Yeah. I mean, the city really belongs to them, yet they derive no good from the city. Others own land, build fine big houses, acquire furnishings to go along with them, make their own private sacrifices to the gods, entertain guests, and also, of course, possess what you were talking about just now. Gold and silver and all the things that those who are going to be blessedly happy are thought to require. Instead of that, he might say, they seem simply to be paid auxiliaries established in the city as a garrison, and nothing else. Okay, and all these characteristics, this reminds me of the first person we met, or one of the first people, Cephalus. So he's a guy with a big house, furnishings, he makes his private sacrifices in the gods, like, in the backyard, and he's entertaining guests, etc. So that's, basically, it's almost like that sort of living requires some kind of slave class, but it makes everybody feel better if we don't actually call them slaves and call them guardians. Okay, Socrates replies. Yes, and what is more, they do it just for upkeep and get no wages in addition to their upkeep, as other men do. Yes, they get prison wages. Like, these guys are basically making license plates. So, they won't even be able to take a personal trip out of town if they want to, or give presents to their girlfriends, or spend money in whatever other ways they might wish, as people do who are considered happy. You have omitted these and a host of other similar facts from your list of charges. It is funny that Socrates is kind of taking the other side of his own argument. Adeimantus. Well, let them too be added to the charges. Socrates. How will we defend ourselves? Is that what you were asking? Yes. I think we will discover what to say if we follow the same path as before. You see, our reply will be this. It would not be at all surprising if these people were happiest just as they are. However, in establishing our city, we are not looking to make any one group in it outstandingly happy, but to make the whole city so far as possible. For we thought that we would be most likely to find justice in such a city, and injustice, by contrast, in the one that is governed worst. And we thought that by observing both cities, we would be able to decide the question we have been inquiring into for so long. At the moment, then, we take ourselves to be forming a happy city, not separating off a few happy people and putting them in it, but making the city, as a whole, happy. We will look at the opposite city soon. Okay, so remember this whole thing was predicated on we were looking at individual happiness and city happiness, and Socrates kind of sidestepped the individual happiness to talk about this ideal city. That's ultimately how he basically banned the argument that an unjust person is the happiest, because you wouldn't be allowed to say that in the ideal city. And it does make some sense that since we really all need each other, like, having a city-state gets you a lot of things that supposedly make people happy. Although on the other hand, they do these studies with, like, people living as hunter-gatherers, in, like, the Amazon, who who by a lot of measures actually seem like they're doing okay psychologically. Okay, so, yeah, he's just saying, look at the big picture here. We're not here to make the Guardians as happy as possible, but, on the other hand, if we just lie to them their entire lives, they'll never know the difference. Suppose, then, that we were painting a statue, and someone came up to us and started to criticize us, saying that we had not applied the most beautiful colors to the most beautiful parts of the statue, because the eyes, which are the most beautiful part, had been painted black rather than purple. We would think it reasonable to offer the following defense. Okay, Someone's criticizing our statue. I've been working for hours on this thing. My amazing fellow, we tell the critic, you must not expect us to paint the eyes so beautifully that they no longer look like eyes at all, nor the other parts either. On the contrary, you must look to see whether, by dealing with each part appropriately, we are making the whole thing beautiful. Similarly, in the present case, you must not force us to give our guardians the sort of happiness that would make them something other than guardians. You see, we know how to clothe the farmers in purple robes, festoon them with gold jewelry, that's a great word, and tell them to work the land whenever they please. We know we could have our potters recline on couches from right to left in front of the fire, drinking and feasting with their wheel beside them for whenever they have a desire to make pots. That sounds like a pretty good life if you're a potter. Reclining on your couch, drinking and feasting. Like, alright, I feel like making a pot right now. Better get up. And we can make all the others happy in the same way, so that the whole city is happy. But please do not urge us to do this. For, if we are persuaded by you, a farmer won't be a farmer, nor a potter, nor will any of the others from which a city is constituted remain true to type. But for most of the others it matters less. Cobblers who become inferior and corrupt and claim to be what they are not do nothing terrible to the city. But if the guardians of our laws and city are not really what they seem to be, you may be sure that they will destroy the city utterly, and on the other hand, that they alone have the opportunity to govern it well and make it happy. Okay, so he starts out with this kind of aesthetic argument relating the city to a statue. And this happens a lot, kind of relating beauty to morality in this book. And so then what he's saying here is, if we try to make each individual as happy as possible, which in this society comes down to those kind of luxurious living, drinking, and feasting, and those delicious attic pastries, then we're kind of make the city worse off as a whole, because the potters aren't going to be very good potters if they're just like feeding grapes to each other all the time. And so he says, in particular, the guardians, our job is not to make them happy, because the rest of the city is going to fall apart if we don't kind of keep them under control. But I think he's saying they're also, we've lied to them enough that they're happy as it is. Okay, so let's see where he goes. Now, if we are making genuine guardians, the sort least likely to do the city evil, and if our critic is making pseudo-farmers, feasters happy at a festival, so to speak, not in a city, he's not talking about a city, but something else. What we have to consider, then, is whether our aim in establishing the guardians is the greatest possible happiness for them, or whether, since our aim is to see this happiness develop for the whole city, we should compel or persuade the auxiliaries and guardians to ensure that they, and all the others as well, are the best possible craftsmen at their own work. And then, with the whole city developing and being governed well, leave it to nature to provide each group with its share of happiness. Okay, and we have kind of more about specialization here, and being the best at your craft. Seems to be a recurring theme here, and now specifically, it's kind of for the greater good that everybody just focuses on their job. It's kind of like those articles about all these like unhappy Amazon employees. It's like, well, it's not about their individual happiness. This is about the greater good of Amazon now bringing you La Croix in 45 minutes. Adeimantus. Yes, I think what you were saying is right. Socrates. Well, then, will you also think me reasonable if I say something closely related? What exactly? Socrates. Take the rest of the craftsmen again, and consider whether these things corrupt them to such an extent that they actually become bad. What things? Wealth and poverty. What is he talking about? We'll find out. What do you mean? This. Do you think that a potter who has become wealthy will still be willing to devote himself to his craft? Nah. Not at all. Won't he become idler and more careless than he was? Much more. Then won't he become a worse potter? Yes, much worse. And surely if poverty prevents him from providing himself with tools or any of the other things he needs with his craft, he will make poorer products himself and worse craftsmen of his sons or anyone else he teaches. Of course. So poverty and wealth make the products and the practitioners of the crafts worse. Apparently. It seems then that we have found other things that our guardians must prevent in every way from slipping into the city undetected. What things? Wealth and poverty. For the former makes for luxury, idleness, and revolution. And the latter for illiberality, bad work, and revolution as well. No revolution. Adimantus. That's right, but consider this, Socrates. How will our city be able to fight a war if it has acquired no wealth, especially if it has to fight a great and wealthy city? Socrates. Obviously, it will be harder to fight one such city, but easier to fight two. Okay, I'm going to pause here just a second to go over this. He's saying we can't actually have anyone become rich because they'll just be worse at what they do and everything will fall apart. It's kind of an interesting idea. I think there is a lot of relevance that, like, okay, the economy today has one goal, which is full employment. It's not like it's not like maximum happiness. It's not maximum leisure time. It's full employment. It's like keeping everybody working all the time. And part of that, I think, is the former. If you have a lot of money, like we spread the money around a little more, you'd have a lot of idleness, luxury, and possibly revolution because people would have actual time on their hands. And so this is, I don't know, this is just kind of this is the argument for making everyone just like, let's just keep them. We just need everybody working. That's what keeps the ship steady here. Okay, and so, then we have this paradox. It's like, well, if we don't actually have any money, then how are we going to go fight other people? So let's see how he addresses that question. Socrates. First of all, if our city has to fight a city of the sort you mention, won't it be a case of warrior athletes fighting rich men? Yeah, or mercenaries. Yes, it will. Well then, Adimantus, don't you think that a single boxer who has had the best possible training could easily fight two non-boxers who are rich and fat? Adimantus. Maybe not at the same time. Not even if he could start to run away and then turn and hit the one who caught up with him first and could do this often out in the stifling heat of the sun? Couldn't a man like that overcome even more than two such enemies? That's so specific. He, draws out the Jackie Chan fight scene exactly. Adimantus. It certainly would not be surprising if he could. Socrates. Well, don't you think rich people have more knowledge and experience of boxing than of how to fight a war? I do. In all likelihood, then, our athletes will easily be able to fight 2 or 3 times their number. I'll have to grant you that, since I think what you say is right. Well then, what if they sent an envoy to another city with the following true message? We use no gold or silver. It is against divine law for us to do so, but not for you. So join us in this war, and you can have the property of our enemy. You think that anyone who heard this message would choose to fight hard, lean hounds, rather than join the hounds in fighting fat and tender sheep? That'd be amazing to receive one of these messages. Okay, but... So they use no gold or silver, but they have luxuries, which is the whole point of them going to war. I don't know. Adimantus. No, I do not. But if the wealth of all the other cities were amassed by a single one, don't you think that would endanger your non-wealthy city? Okay, so we buddy up with somebody and say, hey, you can take all their silver and gold, and then we go to war with everybody, and then that ally now has all the power. And they're gonna turn on us, maybe. Goodbye, Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Know what I mean? Socrates. You are happily innocent if you think that any city besides the one we are constructing deserves to be called a city. Oh, this is the one true city. What should we call them then? Socrates. We will have to find a greater title for the others, because each of them is a great many cities, but not a city, as they say in the game. What is the game? The reference is obscure, maybe a saying or proverb, or to a game like checkers called polis, or cities, in which the set of pieces on each side, or perhaps any subset of them, were called cities, while the individual members of the sets were called dogs. Okay, yeah, no idea. This reminds me of one of those Shakespeare footnotes, like the Folger Library. You're reading it, and they're just like, yeah, we don't know either. This could be anything. Top scholars are stumped. They contain two, at any rate, which are at war with one another. The city of the poor and that of the rich. And within each of these there are a great many more. So if you treat them as one city, you will be making a big mistake. But if you treat them as many, and offer the one the money, power, and the very inhabitants of another, you always find many allies and few enemies. As long as your own city is temperately governed in the way we just arranged, it will be the greatest one. Not in reputation, I do not mean that, but the greatest in fact, even if it only has 1,000 soldiers to defend it. For you won't easily find one city so great among either Greeks or barbarians, though you will find many that are reputed to be many times greater. Or do you disagree? Okay, so a greater title for the others. Okay, so we've got the one true city. I think it's Callipolis. And then we have these others, which are just like regular, non-ideal cities. And he's saying each of those are not a real city. So he says, for example, you have, inside the city, you have the rich, that of the poor and that of the rich. I don't know. It's kind of like John Edwards' Two Americas. So I think it's saying, like, okay, you have this other city, I don't know, wherever, Rome. And really, he's saying all the rich people, like the patricians, they're kind of their own city because they don't really intermingle with, like, the plebeians. And the plebeians are really their own city because they don't intermingle with the patricians. So I guess he's saying that this is the one true city, but then, well, okay, I was thinking we don't really have intermingling between the Guardians and the others, but we do because we're, like, snatching babies back and forth. So it is one kind of cohesive whole. So, okay, I want to see what he's saying here, like why that's important. If you treat them as many and offer one the money, power, and the very inhabitants of another, you will always find many allies and few enemies. Okay, so I think what he's saying here is basically you, like, go to the rich people of the other city and you'd be like, these poor people, you don't really like them anyway. Like, let's be real here. You're just kind of using them as it is. Why don't we gang up on your poor people and then take all their money and power, and you can have them as slaves or whatever. And so, yeah, I guess it's kind of this divide and conquer strategy. So finding cities within cities. And yeah, basically, yeah, finding their weaknesses that way. And it is an interesting idea in that the modern nation state, kind of the strongest ones, at least psychologically, are just like the ones with kind of the most, I don't know, social intermingling, and maybe the most similar sense of identity. And maybe it's easier if you have some, like, disaffected group within that city to, like, team up with them. So one example might be like the American Civil War, where you had, like, in the South you had slaves and not slaves, and the North was like, hey, okay, the South tries to leave the United States in 1861, and the North is like, no, you can't do that. And they're like, okay, hey, slaves, why don't you join our side, because on their side, you're a slave, and on our side, you'll get to be free. And so, you know, I don't know, a lot of them defected over to the North, and then eventually get some semblances of political rights. So I think he's talking about something like that. And he's saying in this ideal city, you won't have that kind of separation. So you don't need the separate word for a city, this greater title. Okay, well, we'll keep moving on. Adeimantus. No, by Zeus, I do not. Okay, the last thing, I want to say is, you won't easily find one city so great. I wonder if he's kind of buttering up Athens here. It's like, we all know the greatest city. That's good old Athens. Like, kind of helps it become a bestseller. Okay. Socrates. This, then, would also provide our rulers with the best limit for determining the proper size of the city, and how much land they should mark off for a city that size, letting the rest go. Okay, gotta properly size it. What limit is that? I think it is this. As long as it is willing to remain one city, it may continue to grow, but not beyond that point. Okay, because we don't want the ideal city breaking in two, because then it's easier to get attacked. And it is a good one. And it does seem kind of tautological. It's like, yeah, we should just keep growing a city until it's more than one city. Like, okay, that's kind of how that works. Okay. Then we'll also give our guardians this further order, that they are to guard in every possible way against the cities being either small in size or great in reputation, rather than adequate in size and one in number. So we don't want the reputation to get too good here. It's another instance of kind of the reputation and reality being different things. So we're saying, in fact, this is the greatest city, but, keep it on the DL. Adeimantus. No doubt, that will be a trivial instruction for them to follow. I don't know why I don't know. That sounds like a joke, but I don't really get the joke. Here's another one that will be even more trivial. We mentioned it earlier as well. We said that if an offspring of the guardians is inferior, he must be sent off to join the other citizens, and then if the others have an excellent offspring, he must join the guardians. Interestingly, he did bring this up. This is in the context of the myth of the metals, where like, oh, we have a gold baby. Good thing we get to give him away now. He didn't actually say that that was going to be the governing myth of the city. He was just like, well, there are certain types of myths, and maybe this would be sort of like one of them. But he wasn't actually explicit in saying that, yeah, this is the myth we're going to have, and this is the procedure we're going to have. So now he is making it explicit that we are, in fact, baby snatching. This was meant to make clear that every other citizen, too, must be assigned to what naturally suits him, with one person assigned to one job, so that, practicing his own pursuit, each of them will become not many, but one, and the entire city thereby naturally grow to be one, not many. Okay. I think this is saying, like, you really have to think of yourself as being a part of something greater than yourself. And this is because you're assigned this task that's naturally suited to you. I think the more immediate effect is maybe your loyalty to your family is lower, because it's like you're kind of breaking up families here. You're just like, oh yeah, we're just taking that for the city. This baby belongs to the city. Adeimantus. Oh yes, that is a more minor one. I guess that's a more minor instruction than the trivial instruction about keeping the city small in size. No, you don't want it small in size or great in reputation. The reputation I'm not sure about. Maybe it's just so people don't attack you. I don't really know. Socrates. Really, my good Adeimantus, the orders we are giving them are neither as numerous nor as difficult as one would think. Indeed, they are all insignificant, provided, as the saying goes, they safeguard the one great thing, or rather not great, but adequate. Okay, Adeimantus asks what's that, but I'm going to look at the footnote here. Okay, see some other passage. Okay, what is that saying? Socrates, their education and upbringing. For if a good education makes them moderate men, they will easily discover all this for themselves, and everything else that we are now omitting, such as the possession of women, marriages, and the procreation of children, and how all these must be governed as far as possible by the old proverb that friends share everything in common. So is he saying the guardians are sharing their women and procreation of children? I think he is. Well, all right. Well, we will see. But he's saying everything's in the name of preserving this ideal education. He might actually, there might actually be something to this, in as much as if you ever read Gibbon or parts of Gibbon, the history of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, his main point is that society fell apart because people just over the generations just got kind of lazier and lazier and more lacking in civic virtue, i.e. proper education. So I'm sure this is played out many times throughout history, which is just you get some generations that are just eventually get to be kind of worthless and don't really care about defending their nation anymore, and then you get sacked by the Visigoths or whoever. Okay, so let's see where he's going with this old proverb that friends must share everything. Adeimantus. Yes, that would be best. Socrates. And surely, once our constitution is well started, it will, as it were, go on growing in a circle. For good education and upbringing, if they are kept up, produce good natures, and sound natures, which in turn receive such an education, grow up even better than their predecessors in every respect, but particularly with respect to their offspring, as in the case of all the other animals. Okay. And I was wondering if he was making a eugenic argument here. I think it's purely an educational argument. That if you receive a good education, you'll give your kids a good education, and everything's okay. Adeimantus. Yes, probably so. Okay, there's just one other thing. I want to hop back a little bit because I was thinking a little bit more about this. He was talking about how the rich people won't really be able to fight these true warriors because they're just fat and tender and lazy. Well, first he doesn't bring up the possibility of mercenaries, which are kind of what these guardians are. They're just trained and paid by the rest of the city. Mercenaries traditionally not considered the best soldiers, but they also do not consider, if you're really rich, maybe you have superior military technology. Not that always works out. I think it was kind of the United States mistake going into the Vietnam War. They're like, oh, check out, we have all these sweet McDonnell Douglas planes and napalm. We're gonna win this, and then didn't really. But nowadays, with your surgical drone strike technology, maybe it is more the case. Okay, but I just wanted to put that out there before I completely forgot about it, because Socrates kind of changed the subject. Okay, Socrates. To put it briefly then, what the overseers of our city must cling to, not allow to become corrupted without their noticing it, and guard against everything, is this. There must be no innovation in musical or physical training that goes against the established order. Whew! No, none of that rock and roll devil music. On the contrary, they must guard against that as much as they can. And they should dread to hear anyone say that people think most of the song that floats newest from the singer's lips, in case someone happens to suppose that the poet means not new songs, but a new way of singing, and praises that. Yeah, we don't want the new stuff, which in the case of rock and roll, people usually want the old stuff. Play stuff from your first album. We should not praise such a claim. We're sick of this experimental crap. However, or take it to be what the poet meant. You see, a change to a new kind of musical training is something to beware of as wholly dangerous. This is also weird because Socrates explicitly said he doesn't actually know much about music. He's just what was that harmony, the sad one? Oh yeah, the minor scale. So it's, I don't know. He's just making rules about these things he doesn't actually know a lot about. For one can never change the ways of training people in music without affecting the greatest political laws. Isn't that interesting? This is what Damon says, and I am convinced he is right. And okay, remember that music has kind of this broader moral meaning from book 3, but it is sort of, music becomes kind of patterns of thought and emotions, and so yeah, he's saying these two things are intimately related, and so once we have like the ideal music set up, you don't want to change that because you don't know what the ramifications are going to be if people are, in particular, say you allow the Lamentations to come back, and all these guardians are like, yeah, I will feel sad if my best friend dies, or I'm going to feel terrible if I die. Maybe I'm not going to be as courageous anymore. So it affects it kind of through this morale and emotions. As for the relevance today, I don't know if it's music so much. Like, there's not really any banned forms of music. But, yeah, I don't know. The thing I think about most in terms of kind of having acceptable emotions would be something like Facebook or YouTube or any social media. They kind of have the, like, allowed reactions. So some sites it was like 1 to 5 stars. Like Netflix got rid of that. They're like, no, you're not allowed to have the 3-star emotion anymore. You either need to thumbs up it or thumbs down it. There's speculation now that they're going to get rid of the thumbs down on YouTube because everybody hated YouTube Rewind. And that, again, this is what he's talking about. Kind of changing the range of emotions changes the political landscape. So if you're not allowed to thumbs down anything, then you're just like, oh yeah, everything's just great. We don't hate YouTube Rewind. We're not going to demand change here. And similarly with like the Facebook emotions, it's like, okay, you're allowed to like it or love it or like have a surprise face or be upset, and like that's it. Like no other emotions allowed. There's no like call for Marxist revolution reaction button. Okay, Adeimantus. You can also count me among those who are convinced. Socrates. It seems then that it is in musical training that the guardhouse of our guardians must surely be built. And this partly explains to me why the medievals thought music was so important. It's like, I don't know, they're like 7 liberal arts, music, rhetoric. I don't remember the other ones, but that was a big thing back then. Now they're just like, music education, we don't need that crap. Get rid of it. Adeimantus. At any rate, this sort of lawlessness easily inserts itself undetected. What is the lawlessness? Is it? Oh, I think it's the musical lawlessness. This is so weird. Socrates. Yes, because it is supposed to be only part of a game that, as such, can do no harm. Adeimantus. And it does not do any, except, of course, that when it has established itself there, it slowly and silently flows over into people's habits and practices. From these it travels forth with greater vigor into private contracts, and then from private contracts it advances with the utmost insolence into the laws and constitution, Socrates, until in the end it overthrows everything public and private. Isn't that interesting? And I don't take this as music per se, as language. So he kind of music and poetry are tied in his mind, which is what he's talking about in book 3. And it's almost like you got to protect the patterns of language in everyday speech, otherwise they just start seeping everywhere. Like everything just kind of starts getting lazy. It's interesting. For example, you just, I don't know, dig up old recordings from like people talking even in the 50s and 60s. People just seem much better spoken than they are today. They're not just saying like like I do. And you just get the feeling that, I don't know, if people speak more clearly, maybe they think more clearly, and then that manifests itself into more clear and well thought out laws, perhaps. Okay, Socrates. Well, is that so? Adeimantus. I think it is. Socrates. Then, as we were saying at the beginning, our children must take part in games that are more law-abiding, right from the start, since, If their games become lawless and the children follow suit, isn't it impossible for them to grow up into excellent and law-abiding men? Of course. So whenever children play in a good way right from the start and absorb lawfulness from musical training, there is the opposite result. Lawfulness follows them in everything and fosters their growth, correcting anything in the city that may have been neglected before. Okay, so when they're playing as kids, they gotta follow rules so they grow up as nice rule followers. Until they're teenagers. Adeimantus, that's true. Socrates. And so such people rediscover the seemingly insignificant conventional norms their predecessors had destroyed. Adeimantus, which sort? Socrates, those dealing with things like this. The silence appropriate for younger people in the presence of their elders, the giving up of seats for them and standing up in their presence, the care of parents, hairstyles, clothing, shoes, the general appearance of the body, and everything else of that sort. Don't you agree? All right, mind your elders, kids. See, they've been complaining about kids' hairstyles since the 4th century BC. I do. To legislate about such things is naive, in my view, since verbal or written decrees will never make them come about or last. How could they? At any rate, Adeimantus, it looks as though the start of someone's education determines what follows. This guy's such a curmudgeon. Or doesn't like always encourage like? It does. And the final outcome of education, I imagine we would say, is a single, complete, and fresh product that is either good or the opposite. Yeah, those are pretty much the two options, good or not good. Of course. That is why I, for my part, would not try to legislate about such things. And with good reason. Okay, so we want to educate people so that basically they're motivated internally to obey their parents and not have crazy hairstyles or clothes and not listen to rock and roll. And with good reason. Then by the gods, what about all that marketplace business? The contracts people make with one another in the marketplace, for example, and contracts with handicraftsmen, and slanders, injuries, indictments, establishing juries, paying or collecting whatever dues are necessary in marketplace and harbors, and in a word, the entire regulation of marketplace, city, harbor, or what have you. Dare we legislate about any of these? Okay, so this is... this is kind of asking about the proper scope of government. He's not really paying any attention to the guardians anymore. It's more like, what kind of rules do we have? Is it going to be the case that that which governs best governs least? Because he's saying here, okay, before he's just saying, okay, we do need all these kids to follow these rules, but laws are not the way to do that. And then here he's saying, okay, in the marketplace, do we need a federal trade commission? Do we need truth in advertising laws? Do we need laws about slander? And establishing juries, I think you're going to need a law about that. Paying or collecting dues, yeah, we're going to have laws about bribery. Let's see, dare we legislate? That seems like a leading question. I think I know Socrates' position there, although I don't really know his position about anything. Adeimantus, no, it would not be appropriate to dictate to men who are fine and good. They will easily find out for themselves whatever needs to be legislated about such things. Okay, so he's saying we don't need to make the laws because we're raising good people and they'll make the laws for themselves. Socrates, yes, my friend, provided that a god grants that the laws we have already described are preserved intact. Okay, so bring in the gods into this for some reason. Adeimantus, if not, they will spend their lives continually enacting and amending such laws in the hope of finding what is best. Yeah, that could take forever. Socrates, you don't mean they live like those sick people who, because they are intemperate, are not willing to abandon their bad way of life? That's right. Such people really do lead a charming life. Their medical treatment achieves nothing except to make their illnesses worse and more complex. They're always hoping that someone will recommend some new drug that will make them healthy. Some things never change. Adeimantus, Yes, that's exactly what happens to invalids of this sort. Socrates. And isn't it another charming feature of theirs, that they think their worst enemy of all is the one who tells them the truth, till they give up their drunkenness, overeating, sexual indulgence, and idleness, then no drug, cautery, or surgery, no charms, amulets, or anything else of that sort will do them any good? Adeimantus. It's not charming at all. Being harsh to someone who tells the truth is not charming. You do not approve of such men, apparently. No, by Zeus, I do not. Okay, and now he's about to relate the individual to the city once again. Then, nor will you approve of an entire city that behaves in the way we were just describing. Or don't you think that such invalids behave in the very same way as cities where the following occurs? Because they are badly governed politically, the citizens are warned not to change the city's whole political system. And the one who does is threatened with the death penalty. Yeah, that's true. You cannot advocate for the violent overthrow of the government, or you could face the death penalty. Probably not just for advocating it. I don't know what the exact law is, but it's not smiled upon. But the one who serves these cities most pleasantly, while they remain politically governed in that way, who indulges them, flatters them, anticipates their wishes, and is clever at fulfilling them, isn't he, on that account, honored by them as a good man who is wise in the greatest matters? Okay, so it's just kind of saying the politician who's just like leading them into further decadence is the most celebrated one. Because he just keeps flattering them, like, oh, you guys are just great. You're doing great with all of your intemperance and drunkenness and sexual indulgence. Adeimantus. Yes, I think their behavior is the same, and I do not approve of it at all. What about those who are willing and eager to provide treatment for such cities? Ah, the city doctor. It's like hiring a consultant. We want to be more walkable. Don't you approve of their courage and also their light-hearted irresponsibility? Yeah, like, oh, I'm just the consultant. Here's the PowerPoint. Thanks for the $1 million. Bye. I do indeed, except for those who are actually deluded and suppose themselves to be true men of politics, because they are praised by the masses. True men of politics. We've seen this phrase before when he's talking about Asclepius. Remember, Asclepius is only willing to treat people who can get better. Socrates makes the argument, I think this is book 3, that... Here's book 2, whatever. Socrates says Asclepius only treated people who can get better because he wanted to make the city as a whole better. And so Glaucon said, Asclepius, a true man of politics. Which I just thought was fascinating, because it's like, nothing in this book is safe from politics. Even like a true craft like medicine has to serve the political ends of the city. And so it's not just being the best doctor you can. It's like, well, you got kind of scarce resources. Let's focus on things that make for the best people, the best city-state. And it's thinking about it some more, it's kind of similar with the craftsmen and with the actors he talked about. So the craftsmen, they're like, oh, you're only allowed to make beautiful images that uplift people's spirits. And the actors, like, no, those multifarious actors, they're no good for the city. So we'd rather have bad actors who can toe the party line here. So there kind of has been this tension between the pure craftsmanship, which I guess is the techne, and the needs of the city. And he started out this book, even some of the very first examples, talking about like what makes a good doctor, like what makes a good ship's captain, made it sound like being the best at your craft was the best possible thing. But as he's gone along here, he keeps kind of undermining that. He's like, yeah, but we don't really, and even more recently appealed to like, oh, we want the potters, we don't want them just sitting around by the fire and drinking and feasting. We want them to be the best possible potters. But we're also going to tell them how to do their job and not to make ugly images. So there seems to be this tension between those two things. Anyway, that all kind of sprung out from this phrase, true men of politics. And I guess that here he's talking about these like sort of consultant figures saying how they want to fix the city. I don't know. It's like some progressive that comes in with some big ideas. Okay. Socrates, what do you mean? Have you no sympathy for these men? Or do you think it is possible for a man who does not know how to measure anything not to believe that he is 4 cubits tall when many others who are similarly ignorant tell them that he is? Okay, is this... No, I do not think that. There's a lot of double negatives here. I'm just teasing this apart. Okay, he says, do you think it is possible for a man who does not know how to measure anything, so we got some idiot here, is it possible for him not to believe that he's, say, 6 feet tall when everybody else is telling him that he is? No, I do not think that means that he will believe it if everybody else is saying it. Alright. Then do not be too hard on them. You see, such people are surely the most charming of all. I'd be curious what this charming word is in Greek, because he's said it a few times. It seems a little bit condescending. Leave a comment if you know what he's talking about. They pass and amend the sorts of laws we have just been describing, and are always expecting that they will find a way to put a stop to cheating on contracts and the other evil doings I mentioned just now, not realizing they were really just cutting off a hydra's head. So, I'll look up the note here. You will recall the many-headed hydra. Can't just chop off one. Mythical monster, one of its heads was cut off, 2 or 3 new heads grew in its place. Heracles, or Hercules, had to slay the hydra as one of his labors. Little Greek myth for you. Yet that is all they're really doing. I would have thought, then, that a true lawgiver should not bother with laws or constitutions of this kind, whether in a politically badly governed or in a politically well-governed city. In the one, because it is useless and accomplishes nothing, and the other because some of them are discoverable by anyone, while the others follow automatically from the practices already described. Okay, so in the one... So if it's badly governed, like you can pass a law, no one's going to pay attention. And in the well-governed city, they're discoverable by anyone. So he's like, if it's well-governed, then we don't actually have to make the law because these guys will figure it out for themselves. Yeah, where does that leave you, philosopher? What remains for us to legislate, then? Socrates, for us, nothing. But for the Delphic Apollo, there remain the finest, greatest, and first of legislations. Adeimantus, what are they about? Alright, so bringing the gods back. Socrates seems to talk about a lot about them. Adeimantus, you remember, wasn't a big theist earlier. The establishing of temples and sacrifices and other forms of service to gods, demons, and heroes. The burial of the dead, and the services that ensure the favor of those who have gone to the other world. For we, of course, have no knowledge of these things, and so, when we are founding a city, we won't take anyone else's advice, if we have any sense, or employ any interpreter except our ancestral one. And in fact, this god, as he delivers his interpretations from his seat at the navel of the earth, is the ancestral guide on these matters for the whole human race. Okay, so he's having this ancestral interpreter. Again, this contradicts some of the points he was making in Book 2 about, like, deducing the nature of the gods. It's like, oh, well, the gods must be, like, they must be the cause of all good things and no bad things. And that wasn't from the ancestral interpreter. That was just from him making stuff up. So now he's kind of going back to Adeimantus's way of doing things, which was, well, we only know what the poets tell us. I'm not sure what this... I'm going to look up this footnote here. I don't know if this is interpretations at the navel of the earth, what he is talking about. Okay, so it's the Apollo at Delphi. Go back. So I guess they're going to, like, the physical oracle at Delphi, which, I don't know, there was just like a thing and some people, and you'd talk to the virgins, and they'd tell you what was on Apollo's mind. I hope they actually go there in the book. That'd be kind of an exciting scene. Right now, we're still at Cephalus's house hashing this out. Adeimantus, well put. That is what we must do. Socrates, so, then, son of Ariston, your city would now seem to be founded. As the next step, look inside it, having got hold of an adequate light somewhere. Look yourself and invite your brother and Polemarchus and the rest of us to help you, and see where justice and injustice might be in it, how they differ from one another, and which of the two must be possessed by the person who is going to be happy, whether that fact is hidden from all gods and humans or not. Okay, so Socrates basically says, our city is finished. We got some guardians, we're not actually going to make laws ourselves, it's going to be well governed, we're just going to keep the education system in place, kids first, and they'll end up making their own laws for themselves, so we don't need to worry too much about the details. It's been a recurring theme here. He's like, I'm just going to lay out the patterns, I'm not going to tell you exactly how the hunting game should take place, but here are the key ideas, fill in the details yourself. Okay, so now he's saying, Adeimantus, you and Glaucon and Polemarchus, I give you the ideal city. Here it is. Here's the Sim City level that I created. Go ahead and have at it. Find justice and injustice, because the whole reason we started this was we were looking for the individual justice, and Socrates says, well, basically you can't have individuals without a city, so let's build up the ideal city and then see what that tells us, just like looking at big letters might help us see small letters later. Okay. Now Glaucon says, that's nonsense. You promised you'd look for them yourself, because you said it was impious for you not to defend justice in every way you could. Yes, Socrates. How about that? You were right to remind me, and I must do what I promised, but you will have to help. Okay, so I'm just saying, no, we can't just examine this ourselves. You're supposed to be defending justice here. Glaucon, we will. Socrates, I expect, then, to find justice in the following way. I think our city, if indeed it has been correctly founded, is completely good. Glaucon, yes, it must be. Socrates, clearly then, it is wise, courageous, temperate, and just. Well, I still don't know why they're going to war if they don't need silver or gold, and they've outlawed most forms of fun. Glaucon, clearly. Socrates, then if we find any of these, what remains will be what we have not found. Of course. Therefore, as in the case of any other four things, we are looking for one of them in something and recognized it first, that would be enough to satisfy it. But if we recognize the other three first, that itself would enable us to recognize what we were looking for, since clearly it could not be anything other than the one that remains. What are you talking about? Okay, so here are the four qualities we're looking for. Wise, courageous, temperate, just. So I think this is his way of saying, if we find out it's wise, courageous, and temperate, then it must be just as well. I don't know. That's kind of a dumb argument. That's right. So, since there also happen to be four things we are interested in, mustn't we look for them in the same way? Clearly. Now, the first thing I think I can see clearly in this city, I see it, wait for it, is wisdom. And there seems to be something odd about it. What? I think the city we described is really wise. And that's because it is prudent, is it not? Yes. I'm going to look up prudent. I'm guessing this will say see glossary of terms. Now, euboulos. In Greek cities, the boule was the council that had day-to-day responsibility for public affairs. In kingships, it served as an advisory body to the kings. In democratic Athens, it served as an advisory body and steering committee for the assembly of all the adult male citizens. Okay, little council, making things go the right way. Glaucon, yes. Socrates, and surely it is clear that this very thing, prudence, is some sort of knowledge. I mean, it is certainly not through ignorance that people do the prudent thing, but through knowledge. Clearly. There are, of course, many multifarious sorts of knowledge in the city. Certainly. Okay, so he's trying to figure out, is this city wise? He says, yes, it's wise because it's prudent, and it's prudent because it has knowledge. So, is it because of the knowledge possessed by the carpenters that the city deserves to be described as wise and prudent? No, not at all. It is called skilled in carpentry because of that, says Glaucon. So, a city shouldn't be called wise because it has the best knowledge, has the knowledge that deliberates about how wooden things can be best. Yeah, certainly not. Just because you got the best carpenters doesn't make you the wisest city-state. Well, what about this then? What about the knowledge of things made of bronze or anything of that sort? Not anything of that sort either, Socrates. And not the knowledge of how to produce crops from the soil. On the contrary, it is skilled in farming because of that. That's my view. Then, is there some knowledge in the city that we have just founded which some of its citizens have that does not deliberate about some particular thing in the city, but about the city as a whole and about how its internal relations and its relations with other cities will be the best possible? Is that a question? I think he means that to be a question. I guess maybe it's philosophy. There is indeed. What is it and who has it? Glaucon says it is the craft of guardianship. The ones who possess it are the rulers we just now called complete guardians. Remember, there's the complete guardians who kind of know everything, and the auxiliaries who are basically slaves. It has this knowledge, then. How do you describe the city? Because it has this knowledge, as prudent and really wise. Okay, so this is a roundabout way of saying, like, it's a wise city because we have these complete guardians who know what's going on, who are the wisest people. They've been raised from youth to have complete wisdom and virtue. And the carpenters and farmers don't figure into it, so those guys don't actually have this special knowledge. And you remember, most of the city is founded on various kinds of lies that everybody else has to believe. And even the auxiliary guardians believe. Socrates, now, do you think there will be more metal workers in the city, or more of these true guardians? Glaucon, there will be far more metal workers. Socrates, of all those who are called by a certain name because they have some sort of knowledge, wouldn't the true guardians be the fewest in number? Okay. Basically, of all the professions, this has got to be the smallest profession. By far. Socrates. So, it is because the smallest of the group, or part of itself, and the knowledge that is in it, the part that governs and rules, that a city founded according to nature would be wise as a whole. And this class, which seems to be by nature the smallest, is the one that inherently possesses a share of the knowledge that alone among all the other sorts of knowledge should be called wisdom. Okay, so he's saying it's like the smallest group of people is what makes this city wise, which is at least wise as a whole because it sort of like reflects the wisdom of the society. I don't know, it's sort of like with our society, we're like, oh yeah, check us out, we're the most advanced because we make these really advanced computers. And it's like, okay, can the average person make can the average person make an iPhone? No. Like, well, who can make it? Like, oh, well, just this really small group of people in Cupertino can make this computer, or can design it anyway. I mean, it's made in, like, Shenzhen. But you take that as, like, representing the wisdom of the entire society, even if most of the society is kind of ignorant on the details. But even today, we definitely use that stuff to show how advanced we are. Like, look at this small group of people that have all the knowledge. Don't we know what's going on? Glaucon, that's absolutely true. Socrates, so we have found, though I do not know how, this one of the four and its place in the city, too. Glaucon, seems to me at least that it has been well and truly found. Okay, it is a wise city. Yeah, it's a little bit anthropomorphizing. I mean, this whole argument is anthropomorphizing because it's comparing people to cities. But I don't know. It's like, can a city really be wise, or does it just have wise people? I guess we think of it as making wise policies. Socrates, but surely courage and the part of the city it is in. So this is property number 2 we're looking at. And because the part of the city is in, because of which the city is described as courageous, is not very difficult to spot. Because we have these courageous auxiliaries who have been lied to their entire lives. How so? Who would describe a city as cowardly or courageous by looking at anything other than that part which defends it and wages war on its behalf? Glaucon, no one would look at anything else, so it's like, it doesn't matter if the farmer or the shoemaker are courageous, we're just looking at the warriors. Socrates, because I take it, whether the others are courageous or cowardly, doesn't make it one or the other. Glaucon, no, it does not. Yeah, have a bunch of cowardly potters. Doesn't matter. So courage, too. And this is the same thing people do today. Like, oh, that's what a brave nation. It's like, no, you're actually just looking at the soldiers. Like, the people back at home are a bunch of wimps, but don't tell anybody. Courage, too, belongs to a city because a part of itself, because it has in that part the power to preserve through everything its belief that the things and the sorts of things that should inspire terror are the very things and sorts of things that the lawgiver declared to be such in the course of educating it. Or don't you call that courage? Glaucon, I do not completely understand what you said. Would you mind repeating it? Yeah, that's a pretty long and complicated sentence. I mean that courage is a sort of preservation. What sort of preservation? The preservation of the belief, inculcated by the law through education, about what things and what sorts of things inspire terror. And by its preservation through everything, I mean preserving it through pains, pleasures, appetites, and fears, and not abandoning it. I will compare it to something I think it resembles, if you like. Okay, preserving the belief about what things inspire terror. So this might be I'm not sure if he's saying this is a society built on fear, kind of Thomas Hobbes style. But I guess he's going to explain a little bit more. Alright, Glaucon, I would like that. Socrates, you know then, that when dyers want to dye wool purple, they first select from wools of many different colors, the ones that are naturally white. Then they give them an elaborate preparatory treatment, so that they will accept the color as well as possible. And only at that point do they dip them in the purple dye. When something is dyed in this way, it holds the dye fast, and no amount of washing, whether with or without detergent, can remove the color. Good old, color fast? But you also know what happens when things are not dyed in this way, when one dyes wools of other colors, or even these white ones, without preparatory treatment. Boy, do I. Glaucon, I know, they look washed out and ridiculous. Socrates, you should take it, then, that we, too, were trying as hard as we could to do something similar when we selected our soldiers and educated them in musical and physical training. It was contrived, you should suppose, for no purpose other than to ensure that, persuaded by us, they would absorb the laws in the best possible way, just like wool does a dye. That as a result, their beliefs about what things should inspire terror and about everything else would hold fast because they had the proper nature in rearing. So fast that the dye could not be washed out even by those detergents that are so terribly effective at scouring. Pleasure, which is much more terribly effective at this than any chalistrian. Don't know what that is. Calistrian? Come on, Kindle app. Carbonate of soda from Callistra, a town and lake in Macedonia. Alright. Any sodium carbonate or alkali, and pain and fear and appetite, which are worse than any detergent. This power, then, to preserve through everything the correct and law-inculcated belief about what should inspire terror and what should not, is what I, at any rate, call courage. And I will assume that it is, unless you object. Okay, so courage is the power to preserve everything through the correct belief about what should inspire terror and what should not. Okay, this kind of makes sense. It's like courage, you have courage if, like, you're not afraid of dying. You're like, I'm not afraid of dying in battle. that's pretty much how we define courage, and we basically tricked these guardians into not being afraid of death through this proper education. And this, I love this metaphor about the dye and preparing the dye, and then the color that doesn't come out. This is what people mean when they say like a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat or dyed-in-the-wool Republican. It's like that color ain't coming out because they were raised in that, and there's no amount of reasoning, no amount of temptation or fear that you can use to get someone to dissociate themselves with that identity. And I think it's just so true. It's like people have a very difficult time parting with their kind of religious and political socialization, as it's called. Basically the values that you grew up with. Most of those are for life. Okay. Glaucon. No, I have no objection. For I presume that the sort of correct belief about these same matters that you find in animals and slaves, which is not the result of education and has nothing at all to do with law, is called something other than courage. Okay, so if there's like a brave animal or courageous animal, and you're like, that's not really courage. We didn't properly trick it into thinking that it'll have a happy afterlife. Socrates, you're absolutely right. Well then, I accept your account of courage. Socrates, yes, do accept it, at any rate, as my account of political courage, and you will be right to accept it. If you like, we will discuss that more fully some other time. I wonder if that'll be a future book. You see, at the moment, our inquiry is not about courage, but about justice. And for the purpose of that inquiry, I think that what we have said is sufficient. Okay. Political courage. Knowing what to fear. You are right. Two things, then, remain for us to find in the city. Temperance, and the goal of our entire inquiry, justice. This is the most roundabout way of finding justice. Hope it's there. It's like, it's a mad, 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 mad world. We're gonna find that treasure eventually. Glaucon, yes indeed. How could we find justice then, so we won't have to bother with temperance any further? Yeah, can we just get right to it, Socrates? Or I guess he's asking himself. Well, I, Glaucon says, for my part, do not know of any, nor would I want justice to appear first if that means we are not going to investigate temperance any further. So if you want to please me, look for it before the other. Socrates, of course I want to. It would be wrong not to. Go ahead and look, then. Socrates, I will. And seen from here, it is more like a sort of concord and harmony than the previous ones. How so? Okay, let's find that temperance in the ideal city. Temperance is surely a sort of order, the mastery of certain sorts of pleasures and appetites. People indicate as much when they use the term self-mastery, though I do not know in what way. This and other similar things are like tracks that temperance has left. Isn't that so? Yeah, how do you define temperance? We have kind of its external characteristics. It's like self-mastery. I can stop drinking whenever I want to. Glaucon, absolutely. Socrates, isn't the term self-mastery ridiculous, though? For of course the one who is master of himself is also the one who is weaker, and the one who is weaker is also the one who masters. After all, the same person is referred to in all these descriptions. Yeah, so it's like, yeah, I have self-mastery. Like, I don't drink at all. It's like, well, you're controlling yourself, so you're the one who's being controlled. So who's the real hero here? Glaucon, of course. It seems to me, however, what this term is trying to indicate is that within the same person's soul, there's a better thing and a worse thing. Right? It's like it's the alcoholic and the person who goes to AA. Whenever the naturally better one masters the worse, this is called being master of oneself. At any rate, it is praised. But whenever, as a result of bad upbringing or associating with bad people, the smaller and better one is mastered by the inferior majority, this is blamed as a disgraceful thing, and is called being weaker than oneself, or being intemperate. Glaucon, yes, that seems plausible. Now then, take a look at our new city, and you will find one of these conditions present in it. For you will say that it is rightly described as master of itself, if indeed anything in which the better rules the worse is to be described as temperate and master of itself. Okay, so again, this is just relating the individual to the city. He says an individual is said to have temperance if, like, part of, like, their super ego controls their id or whatever. And similarly, within the city, we've got masters and slaves. So we got one part controlling the other part, and that is temperance. Glaucon, I am looking, and what you say is true. Furthermore, pleasures, pains, and appetites that are numerous and multifarious are things one would especially find in women, children, household slaves, and in the so-called free members of the masses. That is, the inferior people. Yes? Okay, so these are the things you try to control in the name of temperance. Pleasures, pains, and appetites. But the pleasures, pains, and appetites that are simple and moderate, the ones that are led by rational calculation with the aid of understanding and correct belief, you would find in those few people who are born with the best natures and receive the best education. Someone who likes a nice, simple soup. That's a simple and moderate appetite. Only the best people have it. Glaucon, that's true. Don't you see, then, that this too is present in your city? You love how it's your city. It's like Glauconia. What a great place to live. And that the appetites of the masses, the inferior people, are mastered there by the wisdom and appetites of the few, the best people. So how is it mastered? Are they actually controlling what everybody eats? I think they are. I think that's what he was saying before. The guardians sort of control themselves and everybody else. So if any city is said to be master of its pleasures and appetites and of itself, it is this one. Absolutely. So isn't it also temperate because of all this? Yes, indeed. That is a temperate city. And moreover, if there is any city in which rulers and subjects share the same belief about who should rule, it is this one. Or don't you agree? Share the same belief about who should rule. That's an interesting idea, because, I don't know, most political philosophy is just people fighting over power constantly. And then this one, it's like, the guardians are like, yeah, I'm made of gold, I came up from the Earth's core, I am living in this brotherhood, I'm gonna be happy if I die in battle. Like, I'm the only one who should be in charge. Everybody else is like, yeah, you can think that. Go on thinking that, Guardian. You're the hero here. Well, we'll just let you be in charge. We're going to actually enjoy our lives and have big houses and furnishings and those delicious pastries. Glaucon, yes, I certainly do. Socrates, and in which of them do you say temperance is located when they are in this condition? In the rulers or the subjects? In both, I suppose. Do you see, then, that the hunch we had just now, that temperance is like a sort of harmony, was quite plausible? Why is that? Is it because it's polyphonic? Well, we'll see. Because its operation is unlike that of courage and wisdom, each of which resides in one part and makes the city either courageous or wise. Temperance does not work like that, but has literally been stretched throughout the whole, making the weakest, the strongest, and those in between all sing the same song in unison, whether in wisdom if you like, or in physical strength if you prefer, or for that matter in numbers, wealth, or anything else. Hence we would be absolutely right to say that this unanimity is temperance, this concord between the naturally worse and the naturally better, about which of the two should rule both in the city and in each individual. I agree completely. Okay, they are singing as one. So we would be right to say that this unanimity is temperance. So temperance isn't just controlling these passions, it's everybody being kind of excited about that and then agreeing about it. So it's sort of like, I don't know. I mean, sorry to harp on alcoholism here, but it's sort of like the alcoholic inside the person is like, yeah, I think the guy who goes to AA should be in charge. And the guy who goes to AA inside the person's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I need to be in charge of this one. All right, so that happens at the city level and the individual level. Glaucon, I agree completely. Socrates, all right. We have now spotted 3 kinds of virtue in our city. What kind remains, then, that would give the city yet another share of virtue? For it is clear that what remains is justice. Finally! Are we finally getting to justice? Why does it take so long to get justice? All right, so we got wisdom, courage, temperance. I don't know where he got those from, but it's what's written on the card. Glaucon, it is clear. So then, Glaucon, we must now station ourselves like hunters surrounding a wood and concentrate our minds so that justice does not escape us and vanish into obscurity. For it is clear that it is around here somewhere. I love that. Keep your eyes peeled and do your best to catch sight of it. And if you happen to see it before I do, show it to me. This is great. This is like going on a snipe hunt. It's like, all right, come on. I think we're close. Keep your eyes peeled. Snipe's got to be here somewhere. It's like, I think I see it. I think it's over there. Glaucon, I wish I could help, but it is rather the case that if you use me as a follower who can see only what you point out to him, you will be using me in a more reasonable way. Socrates, pray for success then, and follow me. This is great. Socrates is just in complete control of this situation. Glaucon, yes, you only have to lead. Socrates, and it truly seems to be an impenetrable... Try that again. Socrates, and it truly seems to be an impenetrable place and full of shadows. It is dark at any rate, and difficult to search through. But all the same, we must go on. I love the psychology of this passage. It's like, it's dark, and Socrates is your only friend. So it's like, really just establishes himself as the authority here. And you're like less and less likely to question this guy if, like, he's the one who's going to get you out of here. Out of these shadowy woods. Where we can smell justice somewhere. Glaucon, yes we must. This is back to Socrates' narration. And then I caught sight of something and shouted. Aha! Does he say Eureka? I hope he says Eureka. Note 17? Oh, man. You. Usually a cry of woe and tragedy. Not like EO, a cry of joy. Now you know. Glaucon, it looks as though there's a track here. I do not think our quarry will altogether escape us. I love how physical this is. Glaucon, that's good news. Socrates, oh dear, what a stupid condition in which to find ourselves. Glaucon, how so? Socrates, it seems, blessed though you are, that the thing has been rolling around at our feet from the very beginning, and yet, like ridiculous fools, we could not see it. For, just as people who are holding something in their hands sometimes search for the very thing they are holding. Yeah. Like my dad. Sorry, Dad. We did not look in the right direction, but gazed off into the distance, and perhaps that is the very reason we did not notice it. Socrates, this was your idea all along, to look at the big letters in the distance. Glaucon, what do you mean? Socrates, this. I think we've been talking and hearing about it all this time without understanding ourselves or realizing that we were, in a way, talking about it. Glaucon, that was a long prelude. Now I want to hear what you mean. Now he's mad. Socrates, listen then, and see whether there is anything in what I say. You see, what we laid down at the beginning, when we were founding our city, about what should be done throughout it, that, I think, or some form of that, is justice. And surely what we laid down and often repeated, if you remember, is that each person must practice one of the pursuits in the city, the one for which he is naturally best suited. Yes, we did say that. Justice is full employment, once again. Socrates, moreover, we've heard many people say and have said ourselves that justice is doing one's own work and not meddling with what is not one's own. Yeah, get out of my backyard. Glaucon, yes we have. This then, my friend, provided it is taken in a certain way, would seem to be justice. This doing one's own work. Do you know what I take as evidence of that? No, tell me. After our consideration of temperance, courage, and wisdom, I think that what remains in the city is the power that makes it possible for all these to arise in it, and that preserves them when they have arisen for as long as it remains there itself. And we did say that justice would be what remained when we had found the other three, which I didn't agree with, but okay. Yes, that must be so. Yet surely, if we had to decide which of these will most contribute to making our city good by being present in it, it would be difficult to decide. Is it the agreement and belief between the rulers and the subjects? The preservation among the soldiers of the law-inculcated belief about what should inspire terror and what should not? The wisdom and guardianship of the rulers? Or is what most contributes to making it good the fact that every child, woman, slave, free person, craftsman, ruler, and subject each does his own work and does not meddle with what is not? Okay, so is he saying what makes it good? Is it kind of the first three, the wisdom, courage, and temperance? Or is it minding your own business? It's like the number one rule of society, mind your own dang business. Glaucon, of course it's a difficult decision. It seems then that this power, which consists in everyone doing his own work, rivals wisdom, temperance, and courage in its contribution to the city's virtue. This calls back a little bit the argument from Book 1, where Socrates says, Thrasymachus is like, well, it's just the rule of the stronger, and Socrates is like, no, but the soul's virtue is justice, and virtue is good, therefore it's good to be just. And nobody else really believed him. But it sounds like he's doing this at the city level, and that the city's, what's contributing to the city's virtue are these three things that sound great: wisdom, temperance, and courage, or is it minding your own business? So it's, again, the virtue is justice. Socrates. And so Glaucon, it certainly does. Socrates, and wouldn't you say that justice is certainly what rivals them in contributing to the city's virtue? Glaucon, absolutely. Socrates, look at it this way, too, if you want to be convinced. Won't you assign to the rulers the job of judging lawsuits in the city? Of course. Socrates, will they have any aim in judging other than this? That no citizen should have what is another's, or be deprived of what is his own? No, they will have none but that. Because that is just? Yes. So from that point of view, too, having and doing of one's own of what belongs to one would agree to be justice. I don't know how you define that, like what's yours and what's someone else's. Like, we have kind of conventional rules, like I'm wearing the shirt so it's mine, or like I bought these glasses so that they're mine. But these all kind of depend on societal agreements and contracts and laws. There's nothing, it's like God didn't say that these are my glasses or say that I deserve the money to buy the glasses. So I'm not, I don't know if this is ultimately an argument for the status quo. Like, don't meddle in other people's stuff. Their stuff is whatever they already have. I think Cephalus might agree with that, because he like inherited some cash and he's pretty happy with his life. That was the guy we met at the very beginning. And so I think he might agree that, like, yeah, not meddling in other people's affairs. That is justice. Like, don't take my stuff here. I'm a good guy. I'm doing some sacrifices out in the back. All right, well, we'll see if he fleshes this out some more. Glaucon, that's right. Socrates, now, see whether you agree with me about this. If a carpenter attempts to do the work of a shoemaker, oh gosh, just imagine, or a shoemaker, that of a carpenter, or they exchange their tools or honors with one another, or if the same person tries to do both jobs, heaven forfend, and all other such exchanges are made, do you think that does any great harm to the city? Glaucon, not really. But I imagine that when someone who is, by nature, a craftsman or some other sort of money-maker is puffed up by wealth, or by having a majority of votes, or by his own strength, or by some other such thing, and attempts to enter the class of soldiers, or when one of the soldiers who is unworthy to do so tries to enter that of judge and guardian, and these exchange their tools and honors, or when the same person tries to do all these things at once, then I imagine you will agree that these exchanges and this meddling destroy the city. Okay, so it's like, if you're a carpenter, just embrace it. Don't try to be anything else. Don't try to be like, hey, I'll give you my carpentry tools if you give me your shoemaking tools, buddy. And I think mainly it's to preserve this guardian class, so we don't have people trying to bribe their way into it. Sort of like, I don't know, pulling strings to get into West Point. Not allowed. Like the recent college admissions scandal. Like, here, have several $1 million so that my kid can go to USC. That is going to destroy the city. Socrates was trying to warn us. Glaucon, absolutely. So, meddling and exchange among these three classes is the greatest harm that can happen to the city, and would rightly be called the worst evil one could do to it. So this is kind of interesting, because it's, I don't know, is this creating cities within the city, if, like, everyone's just defined by their profession? Because that's what he was railing against before. It was like, oh, these other cities, they contain several cities, and therefore they're weak. But ours, it's just one unified city. I thought what kept it unified was the fact that we were kind of, like, had the baby exchanges. But maybe that has to happen as a baby or as a kid. And once you're an adult, like, okay, you're set now. You're a carpenter. Don't try to be anything else. Like Michael Jordan, don't try to become a baseball player. Come on, like, you're not fooling anybody here. You are what you are. Embrace it. You're going to destroy the city. Okay. So, yeah. It's the worst thing that could happen to it is people trying to change jobs. No career changes in our city. Glaucon, exactly. Socrates, wouldn't you say the worst evil one could do to one's own city is injustice? Of course. That then is what injustice is. What is he saying? So he's saying he's saying the worst evil you can do is people trying to change jobs. And then he's saying, well, isn't it also the case that the worst evil is injustice? Therefore, these two things must be the same. That then is what injustice is. But let's put it in reverse. The opposite of this. When the money-making, auxiliary, and guardian class each do their own work in the city is justice, isn't it? It makes the city just. That's exactly what I think, too. Okay, so it's kind of... Alright, this is a weird argument, but he's saying the worst thing you can do is changing jobs. The worst thing that can be done to a city must be injustice. Therefore, changing jobs is injustice. Okay, great. And he's saying the opposite of that. If you're not changing jobs, then therefore that must be justice. Okay. I mean, it could be unjust too, just in a different way. It's like, is there only one form of injustice? Certainly there's more than one form of injustice out there besides job hopping. Glaucon, that's exactly what I think too. Socrates, let's not state it as fixedly established just yet. But if this kind of thing is agreed by us to be justice in the case of individual human beings, again we got the individual case and the city case, then we can assent to it. For what else will there be for us to say? But if it is not, we'll have to look for something else. For the moment, however, let's complete the inquiry in which we suppose that if we first try to observe justice in some larger thing that possessed it, it would make it easier to see what it is like in an individual human being. Okay, you remember that passage. It's what we've been getting at this whole time. Why do we even have to start this stupid city anyway? We agreed that this larger thing is a city, and so we founded the best city we could, knowing well that justice would of course be present in one that was good. So, let's apply what has come to light for us there to an individual, and if it is confirmed, all will be well. But if something different is found in the case of the individual, we will go back to the city and test it there. And perhaps by examining them side by side and rubbing them together like fire sticks, we can make justice blaze forth, and once it has come to light, confirm it in our own case. Okay, so he's saying we finally have everything we need to find justice in the individual, and if we don't find it there, we'll be like, well, something must be wrong with our city. I don't know why. Well, the road you describe is the right one, and we should follow it. Well then, says Socrates, if you call a larger thing and a smaller thing by the same name, are they unalike in the respect in which they are called the same, or alike? Alike. So a just man won't differ at all from a just city with respect to the form of justice, but will be like it. This is so weird. Glaucon, yes, he will be like it. But now the city, at any rate, was thought to be just because each of the three natural classes within it did its own job, and to be temperate, courageous, and wise in addition because of certain other conditions or states of these same classes. Okay. So it's saying it all comes down to this division of the city. You can't have everybody doing the same thing. You gotta break them up into whatever, the complete guardians, the auxiliaries, and the everybody else's. Although we also had the poets and the philosophers who aren't really part of that trichotomy. Glaucon, that's true. Then, my friend, we would expect an individual to have these same kinds of things in his soul, and to be correctly called by the same names as the city because the same conditions are present in them both. Ooh. Kind of reminds me of like the Freud's id, ego, and superego. I mean, I don't know if that's true at all, but let's see. Well, we'll see. I mean, maybe this is where Freud got it from. I really have no idea. Glaucon, inevitably. Well, you amazing fellow, says Socrates, here's another trivial investigation we have stumbled onto. Does the soul have these three kinds of things in it, or not? Okay, I'm going to stop here. We've had a long enough video today, and covered quite a bit of ground here in Book 4, looking at the qualities of this city. So we started off, we started off wondering if the Guardians weren't getting a raw deal after all. So Adeimantus is like, hold up, like, what's in it for these Guardians? You're lying to them, taking all their things, making them go into battle for you. They can't be all that happy. And Socrates is like, well, okay, they're happy because we're lying to them. And also, this isn't about them. Like, we're not trying to make them the happiest. We're trying to make the whole city happy. So, and then he goes on to say, like, look, if you just try to make a potter the happiest of all, like, he's just going to sit around, like, drinking and eating all the time and just, like, occasionally make a pot. But we really want, that's not the ideal city. We want everybody working and being really good at what they do all the time. Like, that's the key to our city here. And then he goes on and says that we're going to start, now we're, like, he's kind of built up this city, and then he's like, here, Glaucon, here's your city. Like, this is just the cake you ordered. And he says, well, let's try to find these great qualities in this ideal city. Let's try to find temperance. Let's try to find courage and wisdom. And he goes through each of those, saying, well, it's wise because we have these wise rulers, and you don't need everybody to be wise. Like, the carpenters aren't necessarily wise, but the people in charge are wise, so that's good. And similarly with courage, like, well, not everybody's courageous. You could have some cowardly merchants, but for the people it matters, the soldiers, they're really courageous because they're terrorized by the right thing. They are not afraid of death because we told them not to be from birth. And then we have this temperance, which he says is a bit more, it's like, temperance is like everybody being in agreement. So he says, unlike the other two qualities, temperance is like permeates the whole society. The centerpiece of temperance is everyone agreeing who should be in charge. And for the reasons stated, the Guardians think they should be in charge. The non-Guardians also think the Guardians should be in charge. And then relates it somewhat to the individual, like, you have these appetites, but you really need to be in charge of your appetites. So everybody agrees you got to put reason in charge of your appetites. Or like, you know, you gotta put restraints on yourself to stop yourself from, you know, maybe your own addictions, which he doesn't talk about, but I think is very relevant. And then he goes off talking about this, like, the wool and scouring the wool and how it's hard to change the dye And he says in this chapter that really the whole point of this city is to preserve the education system. And it's that musical and physical education that he talked about in Book 3. And he says kind of the best way to do that is educating them from birth. If you do that properly, they can't be uneducated. It's so ingrained in them, they just won't know any other way of living. And you'll hopefully be able to repeat that going into the future. Honestly, I think there's something to that. Like, pretty much all accounts you read of, like, societies degenerating over time is people get progressively, like, lazier and lazier and then stop educating their kids to be, have civic virtue or be moral in any way. And then nobody really cares about preserving the city, and then it falls apart. So I think he's onto something with that line of thought. So, yeah, so he gets through all the three virtues here, and then finally he says, like, oh, I smell justice. Like, we're like hunters in the woods, and Glaucon's, like, holding onto his side, like, oh, I don't see it. Socrates' like, oh, I think I heard something over there. Like, let's go check it out. And eventually they kind of come on this idea of justice being people minding their own business, which I think is meant in a couple ways. One seems to be, like, private property, like, stay out of my stuff because this doesn't belong to you, this belongs to me, doesn't really delve into that too much, but I think that's what he's talking about. But more importantly, it's that people need to stick with their professions and not try to jump between one profession and another. Historically, that has kind of been like a big feature of stable societies where you're just like, no, you're in this caste or you're in this class, don't try to jump up here, like the gods want you staying right here. And that's kind of like, I don't know, ancient Egypt or ancient like Aztec civilizations, or going, you can find lots of them where everyone's, the way you keep a stable society is just telling everyone to stay in their place, because that's where you need to be, and either appealing to a religious authority, or in this case, appealing to this idea of justice, which is that if you had everybody exchanging classes, you just have these like crappy soldiers because they hadn't been trained from birth, and then everybody would just be doing everything poorly because they weren't happy with their previous job, so things just kind of start falling apart. I don't know. It seems to be like a lot of job hopping, at least among people my age. Maybe society will collapse as a result. Sorry about that on behalf of us. And so finally, he kind of has this argument for justice, but he's like, well, this whole time we've been looking for justice at the individual level. We think we found it at the city level. We're now ready to go back to the individual and see if justice is there. So it's this really long, circuitous route to finding individual justice and properly answering the argument Thrasymachus made at the beginning, where he said actually being unjust but being thought to be just is the best of all. And then Glaucon and Adeimantus kind of building on those ideas in Book 2. So I'm stopping here because Socrates is about to start talking about the nature of the soul. I think we're about halfway through Book 4. And so we'll pick it up tomorrow and see if he can complete the loop here, or if it's just going to take the rest of the Republic in order to do that, which it very well may. Yeah, so I hope you're enjoying this so far. Hit the subscribe button. If you want to get more videos, check out the Book Clap Review Clap subreddit, where discussions of the Republic are happening in anticipation of the big PewDiePie review next month. And leave a comment if anything pops into your head. That's pretty much the way I do these videos, is just making comments as they pop in my head. See you tomorrow.